So yes, thank you very much. Linked travel arrangements and package travel regulation. I am not an expert. I will hold my hands up to that, but I'm just going to do a very brief overview before I hand over to the experts about the current state of play. So yes, current regulations and how businesses can operate within the current regulations. And then we've got Matt from Travlaw, who's going to talk about legal interpretation of proposed changes. And then we have Erika and Andrew from the Department of Business and Trade about the call for evidence for linked travel and packaging. So traditionally, package was quite easy to spot. It was those colourful brochures that we all saw in the travel agency or online, and they were quite clear what was being sold to you. However, other events such as education trips and charity events came under there, hotels offering breaks, including pre-booked events. So it was quite a complicated market to start with. And then along came the online travel agencies. So we started, consumer behaviour started changing. We started booking online, and a lot of the online agencies that grew out of that internet boom were disruptors to the market. So there had to be something done about that. You probably remember all those really cheap fly drive hotel deals. So the legislation came in 2018. It inadvertently had an impact on small, medium enterprises, such as the ones that we predominantly have in the south of Scotland. So businesses wishing to collaborate to boost their offering and make a more attractive package, businesses wanting to add value. So you could technically be an organizer. So what is an organizer? An organizer is a business that arranges all elements of the package, organize individual elements of the package, pre-arranged, or allow the traveller to customize a package. So if you were booking to stay with someone and then they had an add-on if you wanted a dark sky experience or a picnic, technically some of these could come under the linked travel arrangements. So linked travel arrangement is when a trader or the organizer in this case facilitates either the separate payment, selection and payment of two or more services for the same trip under separate contracts with individual providers upon a single contact with a point of sale. So this is the actual official wording, so it's not mine. Or the separate selection and payment of two or more travel services for the same trip through a targeted link booking processes within 24 hours without transferring the traveller's payment details. So that's done away with all of those emails that you incessantly got after you'd booked something online. So it mentions tourist services. So what are tourist services? And if you want more detail on this, do go back and listen to Matt's excellent Travlaw webinar on exactly the subject where one of his colleagues, Nick's, talked in quite some detail about tourist services and does anybody understand exactly what they are? But basically, it's not part of the travel service within the meaning. There is guidance on this. It's advertised as an essential feature of the combination. So if you were booking a holiday and a golf package was a big part of why you were doing that, that's an essential feature. Accounts for 25% or more of the value of the package, or it includes on-site facilities potentially, such as a swimming pool. If that pool was open not just to guests, it could constitute an additional service. So how does this affect you? Essentially, you're liable for the performance of the travel service, irrespective of whether those services are performed by yourself or the travel service providers, i.e. the people you're partnering with. You're liable to the traveller for the performance means organisers, you must immediately remedy any lack of performance. So if part of the deal doesn't go through, and you could potentially be sued for damages. I appreciate these slides are quite text heavy. I will be sending them out afterwards, so you can have a read through them. So traders who facilitate linked travel are required to have clear information to the traveller so they know that what they're buying is not a package, and the individual service providers are responsible for the individual parts of the service. They must state clearly and comprehensive and prominently along with the details of your insurance. It's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. If you're packaging, get public liability insurance to cover all elements of the package and get financial protection for the packages. If you're selling linked travel arrangements, or even think you are, follow the letter to the guidance to the letter and get some advice. All other lawyers are available, although we have some rather good ones on the call. So yes, absolutely get advice. As I said, I'm not an expert. This is just a layman's understanding of the regulations, but there are people out there who are far more qualified. So what is today's webinar about? Andrew and Erika will speak shortly about the call to evidence, which the Department for Business and Trade is running. We really strongly urge you to submit to that. If you've got any collaborations you're looking to develop, let us know. And share the link for the call to evidence to others who you think may be affected by this. If you know other businesses who are questioning this, or they couldn't come along today and for some reason they don't get to see the link, please do share it with them. I will now pass over to the experts and we'll go to Matt.
Thank you, Gowan. Thank you for your kind words. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. Obviously, Erika and Andrew are going to talk about this in more depth. All I will say about the ongoing call for evidence and the package travel process that is going on at the moment with regards to changes is I can't agree enough in terms of this is almost a once in a generation chance to get involved and potentially make a difference. And it's going to take different businesses of all sizes, shapes and types to really form what's needed. If we just get all the big kind of, TUIs and on the beaches of this world who have a very valid view on stuff, that's not going to cover everything. It needs everybody. So anybody on this call and anybody watching afterwards, please do get involved. It's not that much time and everything's set out and pretty clear to understand terms. So yeah, please do. I'm quite happy to cover up anything today. I'm going to talk in particular about linked travel arrangements, but if we have questions, then let's get into it. Just very, very quick introduction on myself. I'm a senior partner at Travlaw. Travlaw are a law firm. We're based in Leeds. All we do is serve travel and leisure businesses of one type or another, and that's a very broad church. Kind of, from well-known international businesses through to new startups of one degree or another, and everybody in between. So it's a nice space to work in. Travel is often talked about as being one of the most regulated areas, and I think it's probably fair to say that some days it feels like it. It does make people tear their hair out, talk about red tape, etc., etc. But it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about that. Subject to, obviously, as I said, this is your chance to kind of get involved and potentially change the rules. But we have what we have. So it's a case of understanding how these things apply to you as a business, and they may or they may not, and then understanding how you can deal with them. We always say at Travlaw, this is nothing you should be laying in bed at night worrying about, thinking about, but you do need to get it right. Right. Garen has already covered off kind of what packages are in quite a lot of detail. Actually, it's an excellent summary, and I agree. You kind of should know really if you're providing packages or not. It's a relatively easy assessment to make, bearing in mind that the laws that we have, which is the package travel regulations in the UK, are very wide in scope, which is code for they're deliberately meant to create as many packages as possible, to have as many of these things around as possible. Why? To give consumers, to give travelers, to give holiday makers as much protection as possible. And the rule makers are unashamed, both at UK and European level, that's the aim of it, and fair enough. And we've seen those kind of situations where customers need that kind of protection, COVID, failure of big tour operators, etc., etc. Linked travel arrangements are only one aspect of the package travel and linked travel arrangement regulations, as they are fully called. And they are almost this kind of almost stopgap, something that was put in that was, sometimes when you read it, you think the definitions of packages trying to capture as many businesses as package providers as possible. This was almost a kind of like, well, if we don't get you with that, we'll get you with this. So there is some element of financial protection for consumers as well. And that's what linked travel arrangements are. However, I've only got one slide today, by the way. As fun as it is to have 20 slides, walls full of text, etc., etc. We can just talk through this. And as I say, if anyone's got any questions. as the slide suggests. Link travel arrangements were always a bit of an odd one in the sense that nobody really kind of like fully kind of understood what they were at the outset, and it's taken a while for us to get to grips with them. Neither consumers nor travel businesses of any description really kind of like see much of a point, or they find it at least hard to engage with. So everybody's on the same page there. But the actual answer is not that far away from what I've just said, which is there are recorded conversations of discussions between various kind of parties and the European Commission before 2015, when the European level law was being put into place. And they saw link travel arrangements as an anti-avoidance mechanism, i.e. there was a worry that anybody who kind of really thought about it might be able to avoid being a package organizer and still sell things in a similar way. And link travel arrangements were there to kind of catch those, so at least there was some financial protection, some protection for consumers. And what they really do is there's two types of link travel arrangements. And again, Gowan's kind of already gone through them, and I don't propose we go through those in detail today. But what they're trying to do is just kind of say, look, if you are selling something which is not a package, and that is absolutely key, if you are selling something that is already a package, you don't need to worry about link travel arrangements because you're selling packages. Link travel arrangements are only there when it's not already a package, but you're still selling the building blocks of things that can come together to make packages. So, for instance, transport, accommodation, car hire is one of the main ones. And I think for SSDA members and similar types of businesses, it's the any other tourist service that might be relevant. So, you know, for instance, you sell accommodation, and then not long after that, the same customer is buying, say, quite a detailed whiskey distillery tour, or perhaps a round of golf. And there is a connection between those two things. So they've not been sold at the same time so as to make a package, but there is kind of a link. The best example, I think, of this kind of thing, it's not necessarily massively relevant to this audience, but it's a good example of when what link travel arrangements were really there to cover is, you know, when you book via an airline, you buy a flight, say from Glasgow to, I don't know, Berlin or somewhere like that. You've finished your booking and then it says, oh, Mr. Gatenby, I see you're going to Berlin. Would you like a hotel when you get there? If so, click here or go to this website for our sister company or our partner company, and they will sort you out with a hotel. Works the same in reverse. You know, you book a hotel in Berlin. Oh, I see you're from the UK. How are you getting to Berlin? Book here to kind of book transport or Eurostar or whatever. It's that kind of scenario where there is a link between those two things, but they're not being sold as a package. There is a need to financially protect linked travel arrangements, the same as there is with package travel, with packages rather. And that's the main thing about LTAs. With packages rather, as Gowan has said, you are responsible for what happens on the package. So if someone gets injured, if someone gets hurt, if they have a complaint about the services, it all comes under the package organizer's remit and you have to pick it up. With linked travel arrangements, it's slightly different. The main obligation under these regulations is to financially protect it, i.e. if a customer passes you money and you go bust, that money is protected. But again, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more complicated to packages, but that's the general gist of it. So where are we right now? Well, Erika and Andrew will be telling you in a minute about the kind of general process which is going on, and linked travel arrangements are one of the things that's up for review, up for debate, up for change potentially in the future with regards to the UK rules. And there are a couple of different proposals there, which I'm not going to get into. But hot off the press, and I wasn't going to talk about this until basically yesterday, the EU are also, remember, after Brexit, the UK has a different way of dealing with things now. We can do what we want with regards to our package travel laws, but the Europeans still have the original laws in place, and they're reviewing what they think should happen as well. And they've made some very interesting proposals in terms of all kinds of bits of the package travel regulations, but just focusing on the linked travel arrangements, what they are essentially proposing is that of the two types of linked travel arrangements that are around at the moment, one of them disappears entirely or gets rolled up into the definition of package. So that makes the whole thing a lot similar if they go down that road. And the other one, and it's what I call the type B, and it's the second one of the ones that Gowan you had up on screen, more or less stays as it is, but actually with a couple of interesting tweaks, which again, I'd love to get into today, but to be honest, I'm still wrapping my head around it because it seems to be a little bit of a change from what we've seen before, but should make it easier. But again, these are only for European businesses, and it's what the UK does, the United Kingdom does, that's going to be really important for us. But I think my big takeaway from all of this is that when you read the Department for Business and Trade proposal that Andrew and Erika will be talking about on LTAs, is it fair to say the writing is on the wall to a degree, in the sense that it's hard to see linked travel arrangements being the same at the end of this process as they are now? But that is very much up for debate, very much up for discussion, because that's the whole point of the process, which is, do we want them to be different? Do we want them to stay the same? More people do linked travel arrangements than you might think. So I would expect that there's going to be a fair bit of interest in this, but it's how, you know, these things affect the SSDA membership and similar businesses that I know we're interested in. So if anyone's got any questions on any of that, I will be happy to dive in. Gowan and Mark, do you want me to talk at all about the kind of travel services and kind of that side of things as well? Or I know you've covered that off.
Absolutely. Well, you're the expert, definitely. I think I rambled my way through. So yeah, it'd be good to have a bit more on that. Okay,
so very quickly then, because I don't want to take up too much time. What this is all about is of the proposals, and again, looking at things that are going to be particularly relevant to membership here. There are these 4 building blocks of packages: transport, nice and easy, planes, trains, automobile, well, potentially automobiles; accommodation, yeah, nice and easy, hotels, cottages, anything where people stay; car hire, it's actually motorized vehicles, but car hire is going to be the main one. Those are 3 of the main building blocks. If you sell these things at the same time, you may be making a package. The other one is other tourist services. So this is where it can get tricky, because it's a very wide element. So again, the historical example I have used is, does it make a package if you sell a hotel and a murder mystery weekend that is happening at the same time at the same hotel? So it's kind of the only reason you're going to stay at this hotel is because of the murder mystery weekend. And there's 2 ways of looking at this. Is this other thing, the murder mystery weekend, is it a significant element, an essential feature of what you're buying, or is it a significant financial proportion of what you're buying? So for instance, if this is a really good murder mystery weekend, I mean, better than maybe some of the ones that I've been on, you know, maybe it's a kind of international kind of celebration type thing. There's highly paid actors, it's really good, it's really, you know, and the only reason that you are going to stay at this hotel is because of the murder mystery weekend element of it. You might argue that there's 2 elements there that could be a package: the accommodation and another tourist service, which is a significant or essential feature of the kind of whole thing that you are buying. If, frankly, it's kind of basically just adding on £5 to the price, it's not that big a deal, and you could just say it's just something that the hotel is doing. Maybe it's not a significant element. So that's an example, but these things kind of go in all kinds of direction. If you're selling accommodation, and then, I don't know, some kind of like historical experience, kind of like, you know, learn to kind of like make items and clothes and kind of, you know, doing some kind of like smithery and things like that, or maybe that is something that is lesser or more than. But it's this definition of how do we come to whatever is another tourist service of a certain element, and it's taking the kind of shift away from the price element to it by the looks of it. We've kind of talked about, you know, 25% being a kind of cutoff. So for instance, if you have a hotel that costs £100 and the other thing is less than, say, £25, maybe that doesn't kind of like tip it over into something which is an essential feature. But now we're just going to kind of, by the looks of it, focus on whatever an essential feature is and kind of drop the price element. I honestly don't know how much of a difference that would make. I don't think it would make a huge difference to the way that we look things. It would kind of make it simpler. But again, this is your chance to say, no, for my business, this is massively important, or price is a really important criteria or indicator about how we look at these kinds of things. So really, really important to look at it if that is something that's important to your business.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll now hand over to Andrew and Erika from Department of Business and Trade. Thank you.
Thanks, Gowan. So hi everyone, my name is Andrew Powell. I am the policy advisor on the package travel team in Department for Business and Trade. So I work in Erika's team, and we're currently running the call for evidence that we'll talk to you about. So on to the next, I can't skip the slide, there we are. So introductions, obviously we've done those. I'll go through and just explain a little bit about what the Department of Business and Trade does. We might skip over what package travel regulations are because I feel like you've had a very in-depth explanation of what they are currently. And then we'll go on to what the call for evidence is looking for, why we're doing it, etc. So what does DBT do? So we're a UK government department, and as our name suggests, Department for Business and Trade, we're primarily concerned with businesses and then UK trade deals with other countries. We're responsible for a whole host of consumer protection legislation, and that is where package travel falls under that function itself. So the current call for evidence. So we launched the call for evidence on the 20th of September, a 12-week call for evidence, which means it closes now on the 13th of December. It's very much an initial evidence gathering kind of process. This is a larger piece of work, so there will be further consultations down the line. But it's kind of getting the ideas and the thoughts and feelings of what works and what doesn't work for you guys as businesses at this time. And we're in the right time to review it. So we're 5 years into the package travel regulations, which is when we're obliged to review them anyway. And given everything that's gone on in the past 5 years, so COVID and Brexit and everything, this would seem like a really good opportunity for us to have a look and see what's working, reflect on what we've heard from the industry, and test whether or not the regulations are really fit for purpose anymore. Are they fit for purpose for us as a UK singular now rather than as part of the EU, and review the framework overall. There's just a brief timeline of where we're going. So currently we're in the call for evidence period. Following that, there'll be a period of reflection, analysis, and that will help us develop some legislative options then to move forward to a further consultation with more defined and refined ideas of what we might like to do. We then look to actually legislate through the Retained EU Law Act. So package travel falls into the Retained EU Law Act as part of what was the Package Travel Directive for the EU. So as Matt alluded to, there's some a few kind of main areas really that we're looking for in the call for evidence. So looking at domestic packages, so the options that we've highlighted in the call for evidence there are, do we want to remove domestic packages from the scope of the regulation? Do we want to remove domestic packages but leave in ones that have a travel element? There's packages, there's also a suggestion around a minimum cost threshold. So that would mean that packages that fall under that cost threshold did not fall then within scope of the regulation. So you wouldn't need then to have the bond in or the trust in place in case of insolvency. Linked travel arrangements, obviously Matt's gone into quite a bit of detail there about what the potential is there to change those. Really in the call for evidence, we're looking to see whether or not they're working for people. Do you use them? Are they benefiting you in any kind of way? And then again, other tourist services. So this is another area where we could look to really change kind of what falls into the scope of those. It's interesting to see what the EU are doing. And I think, that's probably a really good idea to move one of them into what the packages are. But we need your information and your views on it really. So that's where the call for evidence comes in for you guys to really tell us what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and what you'd like to see changed. So then what we need from you, so yeah, let's hear your opinions, let's hear what you're thinking. You can respond to the consultation call for evidence up until the 13th. I think I sent out the links to Gowan, so she might be able to send those out further to you. If you'd like to get in touch with us to have a discussion around what you think you might like to submit, then please feel free to reach out at our email address there. And the package travel call for evidence also includes the ability to feedback wider things. So anything you think is or is not working for yourselves. As a final note, I think I just say that the kind of businesses that perhaps you guys are really who we'd like to hear from. As Matt alluded to, we can hear from the big wigs as much as possible, but it's kind of the ideas and the way that the package travel regulations would work for you guys as SMEs is really will help us change things for the better, really. And I'd love to, hear things around innovation and growth and what can we do to really promote those kind of things.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it ties in really well. So we have recently done a series of in-person locally led destination meetings with communities, stakeholders, partners, and collaboration, or the wish to collaborate, was something that came out very strongly from those. So this this call for evidence comes at exactly the right time when we're trying to build enthusiasm and get people working together a bit more in the region, because we've got a lot of individually really fantastic products, and it would be good to start joining some of those up. So there's certainly some social enterprises and small community groups, again, that if they were collaborating with others, working with others, could build a really strong package for I don't know if you wanted to, I don't know if Erika, you're speaking at all, or whether we can go to questions, or
is there anything I missed?
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Andrew. No, I wasn't planning on saying too much beyond that. I think Andrew summarised where we are. I mean, just a sort of general reflection, you know, as Andrew outlined, we're the Department for Business. And so we are the bit of government that wants to support businesses to grow and help small businesses to innovate and do new things that benefit British people. We are also the team responsible for consumer protection. So at the heart of our job really is to continue to find the right balance between protecting consumers who spend lots of money well in advance of these holidays, who have this is one of their top leisure spends in the year, and continue to make sure that they're protected and they have confidence in the travel and tourism industry, but also not have such intense regulations that businesses are put off even offering things to people, because that doesn't ultimately benefit the consumer or the business. So we're always trying to strike that balance, and that's what we're asking for information on, really. I'm conscious that there may be some on this call and some in your wider SSDA group who don't actually currently offer packages, or even maybe don't offer linked travel arrangements. And in some ways you're the hardest people for us to find and to speak to, because you're not currently sort of in our bubble of package holidays. So really good to have this opportunity. And as Andrew said, we really want to be speaking to people who maybe currently don't have a lot of interaction with this regime, to understand why don't you, and if we did something different with these rules, and, you know, as Andrew said, domestic trips, things that are happening only in the UK, were treated differently, would you be able to offer more to people? And then we can help our ministers to think, well, okay, if you change consumer protections in this way, this would be the benefit. But if we can't establish that there's any real benefit, then there's no reason for us to change the regime. So that, just to add to everything Andrew set out really clearly, that's sort of where we're coming from. But that's enough from me. I think there's at least one hand up, so I'll mute myself.
Thanks, Erika. Marianne.
Hi there.
Hello. Oh, just at that, she's frozen. We can't see or hear you, I'm afraid, Marianne. Does anybody else have a question? Perhaps Marianne's internet will spring back to life in the meantime. I'll go to the one that I had from...
Hi, it's Liz. I can't find my raised hand, sorry.
Go for it, Liz.
I will email this in, but I'm a small business. It's me. I provide mountain biking. I'm a mountain bike guide. I am trying to find a way legally to work with accommodation providers to run maybe 2 or 3 biking weekends a year. People stay in accommodation, they get a couple of days of mountain biking. The whole package to the consumer is going to cost them no more than like £400. I can't get bonding, one, because if you're not £1 million business, the bonding people aren't interested. And insurance that I've looked into so far costs about 3 times as much as the package. So I don't expect an answer today, but I mean, to be honest, I was really excited about this, and I've even had accommodation providers asking people to look at providing activities for them. But the more I look into it, the more it actually doesn't seem possible. So I'm not necessarily expecting an answer, but I mean, I'm quite disappointed, and I'm on the verge of having to just tell people that there's nothing we can do about it. And the consultation is going on, but I mean, let's be realistic, that's not going to be fixed or changed, or maybe it'll help and maybe it won't, but that's going to take a while. So I'm not sure if I'm missing something, but I can't see how it's not a package or a linked travel arrangement, what we're doing. And even though I've got money in the bank and wouldn't spend the money until, you know, the money would be there until we could refund people. But yeah, I think for me, that's basically the crux of this. That it's really not easy if you want to do something relatively small. So yeah, I say I'm quite happy. I've got the email address for the business and trade. I'm quite happy to put it all down in an email. But yeah, that's kind of why I came on the call, I guess, and what my interest in it is. So if I've missed something, please feel free to tell me. I have a feeling I haven't though. So thanks.
I think there's a lot of businesses, as Gowan has also pointed out, are in the same situation, want to expand and are just seeing either obstacles in their way, or they're too small to just take that leap, both financially and legally. And you know, what can they do? Have you got any advice at all for them at this stage before the consultation?
I mean, I don't think there's probably anything I can really advise on that they could do before we made any potential changes to the regulation. Those are definitely the kind of businesses we want to talk to, and that evidence and that kind of story is exactly what we would be able to take to our ministers and say, look, this would be the reasoning for exempting domestic travel, for example, and to set you know, expectation. She's right, you know, Liz is right. This isn't a quick piece of work. This is going to take us several months in order to get everything in place, to then further consult and then to actually legislate. So yeah, so just to set expectation there that, you know, we are looking at several months, maybe a year's long piece of work. Matt, I don't know whether you have anything around the financial implications of what they could do for insurance. It's not really kind of where we would sit, is it?
Perhaps not. It's exactly where I sit, and I'm never lacking for something to say. Hopefully it's useful. Right, okay, where to start with this? Liz, what you say, unfortunately, is relatively common. Come across it lots of times, and it's frustrating as hell, because what you have here is, I mean, the basic rules say if you are offering a package or a linked travel arrangement, there needs to be some level of financial protection in place. Right, fine, we all know that, and we all know the reasons for it, to protect consumer money. I mean, it might be having a separate conversation offline, because I don't want to kind of get into a position where you're saying things that are kind of, you know, private business stuff. But if you're happy to, can you just kind of quickly talk me through, if I am one of the people that's ultimately going to be mountain biking here, what am I booking? Who am I talking to? What am I getting? And who am I contracting with, first of all? What's my interaction with you? Do I come to you first and then the accommodation, or the way around? How does all that work?
Sorry.
So,
Or is it you?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is something I tried to work out about whether it would be better. So the way it's looking at the moment is I arrange a mountain bike weekend at an accommodation site. So people are booking, I'm the organizer, I guess, in the legislation. So people are booking through me, with the accommodation and the biking. Is that what you asked? Yeah.
So at the same time, I am effectively booking through you two things: the accommodation element, and then the mountain biking element of it, which presumably is, I mean, I'm not a mountain biker, so I don't know the lay of the land and the places and whatnot, but you know, I'm guessing, you know, the opportunity to do kind of unique places, whether it's kind of Kielder where it's all set up, or something else that you've kind of put together that's much more unique. That's the reason for me coming to you, and that's the reason for me booking. So I would say, without knowing anything else, that probably is a package, because you've got the accommodation,
Okay.
then you've got the other tourist services, which is the mountain bike side of things. Now, if those are booked at the same time, it would be a package. There are ways and means around this, legitimately. I mean, so for instance, if I come to you on the Monday and book the accommodation, and then in a separate conversation on Wednesday, I book the mountain biking, that would not necessarily be a package, because they weren't booked at the same time. I booked the accommodation here, I booked the mountain bike there. It would take that booking outside of the package travel regulation. whether Andrew and Erika are now sat there going, well, that's not how it's supposed to work, but that is how it works. But the problem with that approach is it's quite anti-sales. No one really wants to do that because, you know, they want, you know, the customers want it all at once, and you kind of want it all at once as well, because you might, you know, sell them the, you know, I know this doesn't necessarily work for you, but sell the accommodation, and then they might go off and do the mountain biking themselves and never come back to you. So you want to kind of get nailed down at once. So there are other ways of doing this. Another way to do it might be to kind of switch around the structure a little bit so that the customer is booking the accommodation separately with another company, and then that other company kind of almost kind of buys in from you the mountain biking aspect of it to kind of make something that's kind of on them. But again, it's all swings and roundabouts, and it may not work, and that may not be what you're wanting to do. But there are options. But to go back to your initial point, I just don't understand why the market does not provide some kind of financial protection for exactly the kind of services that you're describing, because they're, from a consumer point of view, relatively low risk. You know, one of the things that financial protection is there for is, yes, to protect consumers' money. If you go bust holding their money, and it's like, well, where do they go to? But it also covers things like repatriation, so getting them home. You know, UK consumers in particular, getting them home if you do go bust and they are on trip at the time. And it seems to me that the overall risk there is much lower than, say, a flight package where the customer is going to Australia or something like that. And therefore the risk is lower, and therefore the price should be lower for the financial protection, whether it is insurance, bonding, or a trust account. There are those three types. And I know one of the solutions, proposed solutions in the DBT side of things is kind of allowing the market, you know, financial products to kind of set up here and for them to come up with all the answers, which in theory is exactly right and works. But what we've seen in the last few years, and maybe this is a COVID thing, is there just are not people out there prepared to look at smaller businesses, and I just don't understand why, because it's just as viable from their point of view in terms of them making some money on what is effectively a financial product, insurance or otherwise. And just to kind of give you, it won't make you feel that much better, but whilst that kind of stuff is there and available for the bigger companies, they often look at the price and say, I'm not sure that's particularly viable. There's a lot of dissatisfaction, and that is not the fault of anybody on this call. It's just the way things are at the moment. I think it will get better. But yeah, maybe we pick up outside on this one, Liz. And I've just seen Mark, your comment in the chat as well. I kind of think the answer is more or less the same there. One other thing I would add to all of this is one of the proposals that the DBT is putting forward is removing a lot of the regulation with regards to UK packages. So again, if it was your kind of classic bucket and spade flight package going abroad, Spain, Australia, anywhere really, rules are the same. If it is a UK package, these whole rules being disapplied, but, and it's a big but, I think that's only where the various elements of the package do not include transport. So that would mean that, for instance, none of these rules would apply to you, Liz, which is kind of good news. But Mark, if you're offering a driving tour as part of the whole thing, maybe it would apply to you. So it's not all things to all people. And again, as has been said, Andrew just said, you know, my guesstimation on how long the DBT process will take is, honestly, I would measure it in years more than months, but, you know, surprise me, guys.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So feel free to kind of drop me an email or something. If you don't have it and you can't find me on the internet, and you can ignore all the scurrilous rumors that you'll find if you do a Google search. I'm sure Gowan and Morag will be able to furnish you with it.
Thanks for that, Matt. I'll just read out Mark's question so anybody watching back the recording can hear it. Same as Liz, I would like to offer accommodation entry fees alongside my driving tours, but insurance, etc., seems really restrictive. And the one I had in text, you've kind of just answered as well, which was if they were to provide an experience, but moving their guests around from business to business, would they come under that legislation? But like, if you know, the transport angle says yes.
Transport in particular can be tricky because it's really meant for the kind of classical, what we all think about transport. So for instance, if I buy something from one of the SSDA members, which is a train, up the East Coast line from where I live in Leeds, and then a kind of, cottage or whatever, it's transport to get me where I need to be, and then accommodation. But it quickly can kind of get grey with regards to things like a driving toll. Is that actual transport? It's kind of more like what you get when you get there. But at the same time, potentially that's quite an expansive thing, isn't it? All around kind of south of Scotland or wherever.
That was the kind of thing I wanted to throw out there, Matt, was if you're doing a driving tour, chances are you pick people up from their accommodation, they've already booked it, you take them around the driving tour and you take them back to the same place. So you could argue technically it's not transport and we're getting you from A to B, but I have picked people up from Edinburgh or taken them back to the airport, for example. And I guess in that regard, you're offering a service there that you're sort of they're reliant on you to get you to the train station or the airport on time. And I can see why that would become a transport issue. But, when you're driving people around at the moment, I only offer that service. If people want to book accommodation, they do it themselves. I might make recommendations. I might get in touch with accommodation providers and say this person might be in touch, but I leave that all to them. The main reason being that it's a bit of a minefield in terms of trying to get insurance to cover me if I was to package it up. But ideally, as you say, I need to take this business to the next stage or not at all. And it's like, can I get to a situation? I don't have enough bookings at the moment, but ideally to a situation where people can look at my website from abroad, from anywhere, and say, right, this is what I want to do for 3 days. I want to go out with this guy. I want to travel around the south of Scotland. He's going to sort out the accommodation. He's going to book all my meals for me. I don't have to worry about anything. Click a button, job done. And that's where you want to be as a business. At the minute, I've got to bespoke everything. It takes up a lot of my time for, at the minute, not huge numbers, but that could potentially change. And that's where I need to be with the business. And obviously, that's where SSDA are trying to drive people to come in here. But we seem to be making it quite difficult for people to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I have some thoughts on that, but you can see Erika has got a hand up as well. So better if I don't talk all the time.
No, go for it, Matt. I'll come in after you.
Well, all I was going to say is, and I'm partly speaking on your behalf here, you and Andrew, so you can tell me to shut up if that's not the case. But like, I think actually we're all on the same page here. I think that as Eric has just said, DBT want to encourage business. Yes, they've got to keep an eye on the customers, the consumer protection side of things. But, the last I looked, the UK government in whatever form wants businesses to succeed, wants to have trade. They'd love nothing more if your business took off. Yes, you're paying taxes as in line with it as a result, but it goes well, brings people into, Scotland, as you say, because that's ideal for the UK government and indeed Scottish government, local government, name it what you will. And if that can be achieved in a sensibly easy way, if you look at the insurance and say, or whatever the financial protection is, I can afford that. That's, I can fit that into my business model and you can crack on. I think that's the ideal situation. I'm just not quite there yet. And it's really frustrating. And that is not, I have to say, anything to do with the DBT. So anyway, that's all I've said on that.
One sort of way around it potentially is a bonding mechanism that Liz alluded to. And yeah, if you go to a bonding company, they're going to want tons to set this up, and we don't have the funds to do that.
Yeah.
But if a third party, and say it was someone like the SSD, and it may not be them, but someone like that, if the booking was to come in, and let's say it was £900 in total for this 2-day package or whatever it was, with accommodation, all other bells and whistles with it, and that money doesn't come to me until the tour is over and everyone's satisfied that the service has been provided. I don't know if there's a mechanism for that.
Yeah, I mean, what you just, so there's 3 types of financial protection: bonding, insurance, and trusts. And a trust account is basically what you just described, Mark, which is, the customer pays the money, you put it in a trust, and you can't then access that to pay your suppliers and things like that until basically the customers are either set off or returned from the trip. There's pros and cons to that. It's relatively low cost compared to the others, but the obvious issue is you can't touch the money. There's talk of there being more flexibility in that space, but again, it's not here completely now. But you're right, there's all kinds of potential solutions to this. And it's such a shame that they're not there right now for you. Okay, I'll shush.
Erika, do you want to come in?
Happy to, but if there's others with their hands up, I'd rather others spoke than me. So Marianne, did you have your hand up and want to come in? Please do.
Thank you, Eric.
Sorry for my dramatic exit there. Couple of points that I had. Talking about accessing the smaller businesses, getting the feedback from the smaller businesses. I think from a rural perspective, just so now I'm a freelancer. I don't have a sort of tourism business as such, but I have worked as a travel agent in the past as well. So I do understand on scale that sort of macro picture in terms of, dealing with airlines and, who's liable for what and everything. But I think in terms of working with rural businesses, there's a bigger picture understanding that needs to sort of surface, I think, of how much this kind of work is reliant on voluntary community work. So you've maybe got small communities, and there are small businesses within those communities who would benefit from being better connected with sort of bigger packaging with bigger companies and pulling trade into these small communities that way, but can't do it on such a small scale. So they group together, and then they maybe do, get some funding to do some community sort of destination work, pull together a sort of collective identity. And then at that stage, they then look for more funding to try and work out how to make it sort of viable to connect commercially, to draw people into their sort of rural small pockets. The trouble with that is it's all reliant on volunteers, and if they're lucky enough to get someone in post as a sort of to manage the sort of community action, the community development, it's very short-term funding that they're working with. So I have a commercial background, and just looking at it from that angle and talking to the way they have to function, and thinking about the commercial, I used to work for a tour operator as well. So the commercial side of it, if I was still working for a tour operator, I would not engage with those groups because it's not reliable, repeatable business that you can slot into a package and, repeat and sell as, commercially in that way. And I think there is this sort of, there's nobody really from those groups on these calls because it's not something they can prioritize because of the way everything is relied on voluntary contribution from communities in that sense. I know there's a lot of frustration within community groups about that. And I know that's very small scale, but I think if you're trying to access those people, I think, the foundations of how all of that functions needs to be looked at, because it's really hard to make the connection between the really great experiences that are available at that level that have to group together in order to be substantial enough to be packaged, and connecting that into a sort of in a commercial way. I don't know if that was a question, but more of a point, I suppose. And the other point I had was around events. So in the south of Scotland, obviously recently we've had large scale events that have been pretty successful, but I don't know, I'm just speaking for myself here, I would say that we didn't necessarily manage to make the most of the potential for the smaller businesses, in how they interact with those big events, that understand all the legislation, understand all the what they're looking for, how to work with smaller businesses. And I think it's just so much more than the scale of these small businesses to understand how to work when these big events come in. So is there a way that we could have some kind of intermediary that's supporting these small businesses to interact, you know, and build these packages and build these, you know, travel links, etc., because there's just not the resource in these small scale communities and businesses to do it. And obviously, you know, there's a part for SSDA in that, but yeah, I just think there's maybe not enough consideration for how it all happens at that sort of micro level. Obviously I understand it from a macro level and dealing with airlines and dealing with, you know, but if that's what you're really interested in getting to grips with, I think there's a lot of thought that needs to go into what the landscape actually looks like at that scale. I don't know if that's a question or just a point of discussion.
You know, it's interesting, Marianne. I had emailed, and I don't know if the lady who picks up the emails is part-time. So there's an organisation Scotland-wide called SCOTO, which is Scottish Community Tourism Organisation, and we work with them on some projects down here. So they are going out and talking to a lot of these, exactly the sort of businesses and communities that Marianne's talking about. So I'm going to send them this afterwards and encourage them to feed in, because I think they'll have that unique perspective from some smaller communities than we currently work with.
I'm just going to say on that, I was on a call the other night, a SCOTO call the other night, and it was looking at volunteerism, and it was looking at well, Radical Travel, who I used to work for. Graham was on talking about how he's managed to package community work with what's it, the Slate Community Group, I can't remember, in Skye, and how they've managed to build that into, and Radical Travel is part of the Travel Corporation, so it's a, you know, big, you know, tapping in from a micro to macro scale, but talking about how that works and how they've made it work. And I think, you know, from understanding Radical's business as well, you know, the commercials of it aren't there yet, but they're really keen. These small operators are really keen to build that kind of product in, but it's not a commercially viable product yet. It needs to be repeatable, and it needs to be there's a lot more work that needs to go into making that a viable commercial product to sell. But at the moment they run it as, you know, something, you know, they're looking for the innovation, looking to build that kind of market. But again, there's so many things that need to happen to make that work. But I think a lot of that conversation, yeah, needs to be happening with the community groups. And, you know, it did seem to come down to this short-term funding and a lot of reliance on voluntary work.
Yes, no, well, Marianne, for transparency, I used to work with Marianne, so she has heard many of my long rambling rants about, I think there's real scope for community-led packaging tourism, but it's who's willing to take the risk, and would anybody, you know, like Liz has found out, is there any company out there willing to cover the bonding or the cost of that insurance? So it's a whole different landscape to these big operators, and Radical are doing a fantastic job, but I don't know how viable it's going to be for them long term. But I think sitting within communities, certainly in our region, there's a potential for that, and if some of these proposed changes come about, it could really accelerate that growth and development there. Erika.
Thank you. This is really, really interesting, and exactly the sort of thing we were hoping to get into today. So thank you. Appreciate we've not got loads of time left. So maybe I'll flag this as something to provide in written returns or in a follow-up conversation if the time's not there to talk about it now. But just slightly going back to Mark and Liz's points about the barriers to putting things together. Obviously, we've majored on being able to get insolvency cover, being able to get the insurance to comply with that bit of the package travel regs, which are in place so that hundreds, thousands of pounds worth of consumer money paid months, maybe years in advance, doesn't go missing if something goes wrong. You know, so the aims underpinning that are good ones, I think, and I would defend them, but understand the barriers it then presents. What I would like to understand is that the barrier that's on people's minds, or are there other bits the requirements that put people off packaging. So for example, to take the mountain biking plus accommodation, let's say, you know, the mountain biking is £200 of the package, the accommodation's £300. They book it for £500 as a package. They turn up at the accommodation, the weather's really bad, the mountain biking can't go ahead. If they've booked a package, that would have an impact on whether they were entitled to a refund for the accommodation, and you as the organizer would be responsible for that. If there's no protections there, then the people who came up for their mountain biking holiday, booked the accommodation and the biking, find out the mountain bike is not available, don't have any ability to get a refund on their accommodation, even though they've only come to that place for that trip. So it's also things like that, sort of what happens with knock-on impact. If one bit of what you've offered can't go ahead, are people entitled to a refund for other bits of the holiday? So there is sort of more going on with what comes into play when you package something together and the protections in place. So it would be good to understand the extent to which those things might also put people off, or is it just the insolvency cover? Because then what we could look at is, well, do we just change requirements around insolvency cover? Do we put something in place in the sector that helps the insurance market to offer to these sort of businesses? You know, it's a different question for us. So yeah, it would be good to kind of dig in a little bit to, you know, what are all the requirements that being a package organizer mean for you, and which are the ones that really put you off and which ones don't, if that makes sense. But yeah, conscious we're over time, so maybe something to come back to at another point.
Fantastic. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you for helping us put this on. I see it as a fantastic opportunity. We just now need to maybe sell it a little bit more. We'll be sending the webinar and the links round. I'll include your links that you've put in there, Erika, as well, so people can have a look at it, and hopefully they'll feed back to you. I don't know, maybe there is a further discussion or something we can set up. I'm just conscious of the timescales, but if anybody comes out the woodwork with further questioning, I'll certainly encourage them to go to yourselves. Thank you for everybody for attending. Really interesting. I found it really interesting. Hopefully you did as well. And yeah, feed in to the call for evidence. Do it now while it's fresh in your mind.